Hello and welcome to our Rise and Shine webinar. My name is Tracy Bird and I run the SCVO Information Service. Thanks to you all for joining us today. And just to note that this webinar is being recorded and will be available later on the SCVO website. With the support of CCLA Investment Management, SCVO is hosting a series of free events to celebrate Trustees Week. I'm delighted to start off the week today in the company of 4 of the 5 finalists of the Scottish Charity Awards Trustee of the Year. They're all from very different organisations, but the one thing they have in common is that their work as trustees over the last year is really inspirational. I'm going to chat to them all today about their experiences of the past year and what they find rewarding and challenging about being a trustee. We want to keep this session informal and conversational, and I'll be asking each of our finalists in turn to tell you what their biggest achievement of the last year was and the lessons they learned during the pandemic. And if you have any questions for our trustees, do put them in the chat and I can put them to the trustees at the end of the session. So today we have with us Fiona David, Elias Dunlop, Julia Grindley and Robert Smith. And Fiona, I wondered if I could start with you. You're a director of the Edinburgh Festival Fringe Society, and the Fringe was cancelled during the pandemic and funding dried up. So really the charity's survival was in question. You've been on the board since 2015. Can you tell us a bit about your own experience of being a trustee?
Yes, thank you for the introduction, Tracy. Yes, I really enjoy being a trustee of the Fringe Society, despite the traumas that we've been through since the pandemic. The last 18 months have been particularly challenging, but with challenge also comes reward and you know, a feeling of enjoyment as you get through the end of it and see light at the end of the tunnel. So we were sitting there in March thinking, well, is there going to be a Fringe in 2020? And as time evolved, it became clear that there wouldn't be. And then, of course, we were then facing in 2021, would the Fringe come back then, and in what kind of shape and what kind of size? So we've been through, like many organisations, been through the mill in trying to get funding to help us survive through that time. The Fringe has been around for over 70 years, and we certainly didn't want to see its demise. So the big challenge was to get funding to support the team through that crisis, and then to come out the other side, in a sense, in the best possible shape we could be, not only financially, but also it gave us the opportunity to just think about what are we here for and remind ourselves what were the best bits of what we did before and how do we bring those back and leave some of the other bits behind. So it's been rewarding, but I wouldn't say it was worry-free or stress-free.
No, I can imagine. So really going back to that organisational purpose, you know, what you're there for, that was the fundamental thing for you, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. There to help artists to come to the Fringe, to make the most of the Fringe, to develop their careers after the Fringe, and for us as a society to make the Fringe marketing clear and policy clear and really support that ecosystem that is the Fringe. We don't own it, but we try that to be the glue that kind of holds it together.
Yeah. And are you more optimistic for next year?
I am indeed. We had a good comeback, and we also started to explore, and I think this is one of the things that's come through the pandemic, is that changes happen faster than it might have done otherwise. And so we accelerated the work that we were doing on making the Fringe digital as well as in person. And so that has been a success in 2021. And I think we'll be able to build on that as we go forward, as well as continuing with the normal face-to-face Fringe based in Edinburgh.
Yeah. And would you say the biggest challenge was just really keeping the doors open, even though they were closed? But you know what I mean, metaphorically.
Yes, I think that is the biggest. That is the biggest challenge, and I think it's getting other stakeholders for us all to pull in the same direction, for people to appreciate the challenges, for funders to appreciate the challenges that we were facing, and to get that support. Those were some of the key things I think that were challenging for us.
Yeah. Thanks, Fiona.
Okay.
Okay, we'll come back to you, no doubt. But over to Elias Dunlop, and she's been involved with Cosgrove Care for over 30 years and has lived experience of the issues the charity exists for. And this has made her a strong advocate of promoting the rights of people with learning disabilities and really keeping everyone focused on what really matters. Elias, you've been a trustee for the past 3 years. Can you tell us a little bit about your story, please? Elias, you're on mute, so just take off the, thanks.
That's what happens when you follow instructions. Thank you for the introduction. Yes, I've been involved with Cosgrove, as you say, in a range of capacities over a fair number of years. And as you said, I'm now a trustee of the organisation. Cosgrove actually celebrated its 60th anniversary in 2020. Wow. Unfortunately, it couldn't be the celebration that we had planned for, but like all organisations, we had to adapt. For those that don't know anything about Cosgrove Care, the organisation provides support to children, adults, young people and their families across Central Scotland. We assist individuals with learning difficulties and other more complex requirements. The organisation itself also holds autism accreditation, and it's registered with the Care Inspectorate. So there are an awful lot of boxes to be ticked one way and another. I was involved over the period of the pandemic in terms of having weekly meetings with the management team, because obviously we have staff who were going into people's homes to care for them, wearing full PPI, etc. And it was a changing pattern in terms of what was happening from week to week. We had to be very much on the ball. And the organisation has 2 chairs. So the 2 chairs and myself were the emergency committee that worked on a weekly basis with the management team, ensuring that we were, as an organisation, protecting the individuals that we were working with, but also very much as well making sure that our staff were protected, because without staff we couldn't provide the care and attention that our service users required. We also, like Fiona, moved far more speedily into the digital age. Prior to the pandemic, the organisation organised classes for the children's classes for adults, things like fabric art, drama, and those classes, of course, had to stop. So very quickly, we moved into providing a fair number of classes. Some we couldn't for technical reasons, but we did, for the bulk of them, move into providing classes via Zoom. And that has proved to be absolutely, I know from the point of view you mentioned, I've got personal experience, that became a boon, for example, for my daughter and her group of friends that have contact with Cosgrove Care. I think what the past period has shown me is that as trustees, we need to be very, very flexible in our approach. We need to be available to support our staff, whether it be management team or whether it be those that are out in the field. And we have come through the pandemic in, I think, in many respects, a stronger position than we maybe started with, because of the drive, as Fiona mentioned in her a discussion or her talk, because we had to take things forward and be more innovative. I think in many, many respects, we're a much stronger organisation now.
That's great to take that positive from what was probably quite a scary time and a horrible time, certainly in the first few months. Yeah.
I think the other thing is it's not over yet.
Yes.
For organisations such as ourselves, we're still using PPI. We've still got to be incredibly careful.
Yes.
We still get, weekly reports that have to be fed through to government and things like that, which again is an extra stress for the staff.
Yes.
So they need support to know that they've got the backing of the trustees, not just myself, but the other trustees.
Yeah, it sounds full on, certainly. Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Lilias. Okay, now I'm going to go to Julia Grindley, and she's chair of the Edinburgh School Uniform Bank, and that's a charity which is a safety net for struggling families and a vital resource for education and health professionals. Julia, how has your past year been as a trustee?
Challenging, shall we say, but also extremely rewarding. So just a little bit of background, what Edinburgh School Uniform Bank is, so we do what it says on the tin. But what a lot of people don't know is that most of the uniform and other essentials like bags and stationery that we provide to children and young people are brand new, and that they are donated to us by members of the public and companies. So we have a tremendous amount of support in and around Edinburgh, which means that children can go to school with sparkling, clean, bright white polo shirts and things on the first day of term, just like all their peers, regardless of their circumstances. We also distribute nearly new school uniform that our volunteers are very picky in sorting and cleaning and redistributing, so that only the really good quality stuff goes out to schools and community groups so that they can pass it on to their local families in whatever way is best for them, whether it's a swap shop or a take what you need rail or whatever. So the idea is to normalise the reusing of school uniform and other bits and pieces, so that it takes away the stigma. So if everybody's taking what they need when they need the next size up jumper, then it just makes everything so much better all round, including for the planet. So we had a bit of a nightmare in 2020, as everyone else did. We lost access to our premises. Most of our volunteers were unable to come in and keep doing all the sorting and packing and delivering that we would normally have going on. Donations dried up in an instant in about the middle of March, because obviously people weren't out and about and couldn't go shopping and donate things to us or even give us their outgrown clothing. So we had a problem on our hands, particularly because we had no employees at the time. There was a management committee of 3 effectively, we were all trustees at the time. The other 2 were unable to do hands-on work for the first phase of COVID. So it was really a question of, do we fold or do we keep going in some kind of other creative way? So I used to be a chartered engineer, so I kind of, that bit of my brain kicked in, and we kind of just brainstormed lots of processes and ways to do things in creative ways, like passing through things through windows instead of going in through doors that we weren't allowed to use because of COVID restrictions, all sorts of weird and wonderful things. But we made it happen. And last summer, when the kids went back to school after such an incredibly long layoff, we managed to get about 800 packs of brand new school uniform out to children and young people for the first day of term. So that's 800 kids who were going in, looking smart, fitting in, feeling confident and ready to really get back into their communities, because we knew that a sense of belonging for the kids going back was so important that summer, even more than usual. So we just pulled out all the stops to make that happen. I mean, obviously the challenges were of the practical nature, just overcoming every single barrier that COVID threw in our way. But it's just so incredibly rewarding. I mean, you know, when a young mum bursts into tears of joy because you've given her a bag of new school clothing for her children, it just makes it all worthwhile. So absolutely fantastic effort by the whole team.
Yeah, because you just want your kids to fit in and feel comfortable, don't you? So yeah,
exactly.
Brilliant.
Yeah. And I mean, in terms of what we learned, I think it's something I've always known deep down, but COVID really shone a light on it, is that you never know what life's going to throw at you in the way of circumstances and events and restrictions and, you know, happenings. But regardless of what life throws at you, there's always a massive amount of generosity and goodwill out there that needs the likes of ourselves as trustees and volunteers and staff and everyone else working in this sector to just direct and harness that goodwill towards whoever's needing it in our local communities and beyond, and that will always be there.
Yeah, and just like everyone else here, I think the fact that you were agile and you saw the opportunities as much as the challenges is fantastic. Thanks. Okay, and last but certainly not least, we have the winner of the Trustee of the Year, Robert Smith, and Robert's chair and co-founder of Links Community Project. Robert, can you tell us a bit about your experience of being a trustee and why you were nominated in the Scottish Charity Awards? Robert, I think you're on mute, so if you could just unmute yourself. That's it.
I was telling you it's not. How's that?
Oh, no,
Can you hear now?
I can hear you, Robert.
Okay.
Yeah.
Once again, thanks for the introduction, Susie. Thanks for the introduction. I've been involved with the Links project since the early 2000s. Small project based in Knightswood. We are family based. We very young to the very old. We started, I suppose, from assistance from Cosgrove City Council. It was small groups coming together to form the Links organisation. During the pandemic, it was exceptionally difficult. It was about bringing local organisations together to provide support to one another, to provide funding to get the job done, to speak to local suppliers of food. During the time, we delivered around about 18,000 bags of messages. 18,000 bags of meals and about 2,500 bags of messages. That's me in trouble already. We had great staff support from the team at Links. We also found that many older people were struggling to live with the restrictions, so we set up a small friendly chat where we had volunteers phoning up older people, just basically making sure they're all right, having a nice wee chat with them, trying to assure them that everything was okay. And we still run round about our motto, which is all people, one community. And if Tracy, if it be permitted, I'd just like to thank all the volunteers and staff from Links for a fantastic job. It was very difficult, challenging circumstances.
Yeah. Sounds like you've got a great
and
team
everybody was
behind you.
frozen, I think.
No, we can still hear it. It's fine. Yeah, I'm just saying it sounds like you've got a great community behind you. Yeah.
Yeah, we certainly have. We have 6 members of staff working in the Links project. We have 16 people on our board, but we have a lot of volunteers who get involved with packing bags, with helping to make sure that meals go out in time. It was great working together. I can't say enough about the volunteers involved. It was just massive. It was like our headline, all people, one community.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Okay, well, it's Trustees Week, as I've said, and part of that is about encouraging people to become a trustee as well. Did you all get the tap on the shoulder? Were you press ganged into it? Did you have any reservations? Has it been what you thought you're going to be? I'll go in reverse order now, Robert. I'm talking to you. So you've been involved with the organisation a long time, but how were you persuaded to go on the board and take on that responsibility?
It was the local housing at the time who put out just a small invite to all the residents on the estate, asked them to come on to a meeting. There was about 16 of us went along. From that, they formed a small steering body to look at ways of encouraging local people to get involved. We then also, from that, formed the Links group about in 2004 as a steering group, 2006 as a charity. And it was just about going along to the meeting and seeing what's there and getting involved.
Yeah, And has it been what you thought it would be, or worse or better than you thought it would be?
I'm very surprised at how well we have done over recent years, but I've thoroughly enjoyed the time there. Through all these challenging times and through the good times, it was really, really good.
Yeah,
That's
great. So you would say to anyone thinking about being a trustee, just go for it.
Go for it. The more trustees organisations can get round about Scotland, the stronger the organisations will become. And when you get strong volunteer organisations, you'll have a really strong country.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Robert. Julia, I'll come back to you. SCVO this week, we're going to focus on board recruitment and diversity on boards. And I know a lot of organisations find it really hard to recruit. That's why we're doing a special offer with Good Moves. We're going to have free advertising for the next 2 months for anyone wanting to fill some gaps on their board. You've got quite a small board. Have you found it difficult to recruit trustees?
Yes, we only have a board of 5 just now, so we're small but perfectly formed at the moment. We are actively recruiting just now. That process is underway. We have struggled in some ways, but it's also a question of the strategy that we're taking as a board to find people, because, you know, certainly towards the early days, it was more a question of, oh, do we know anyone who's got certain skills or whatever it might be, and let's explore options with them and see if they might be suitable. But you tend to then end up in a bubble with very like-minded people from the same kind of social background and age and that type of thing, which is not necessarily all that healthy for an organisation. So we are trying hard to widen that and to diversify. I wish I knew the answers to finding people and really sort of broadening our sort of backgrounds and skills and experience and all that kind of thing. But one thing I have noticed, that trustees tend to be fairly invisible. And I think it's maybe quite a leap for people to imagine what a trustee looks like and what we do, unless we get ourselves out there on events like this and actually just show our face and say, this is what we do, and we're just normal people wanting to help out and do our bit for society. So, you know, if anyone else has any more suggestions about how to be more broad and diverse, I would very much like to hear them.
Yeah. Well, with that, I can have a small advertisement break and just say we're running a webinar this afternoon at 1 o'clock on the trustee recruitment cycle. And there's a special toolkit that's been designed to get boards to look at, you know, right from the beginning, what kind of skills do you need on your board, right the way through to what should you put in your recruitment ad, to a good induction, that kind of thing. So I'm hoping we'll get a good turnout for that this afternoon. But you're not alone, Julia. I think it's a problem across the sector. And, you know, I wish more people would become trustees. I think if you say to people, you know, are you volunteering? They don't think of becoming a trustee. They would think maybe of working in a charity shop or working on that direct line thing, which is great. But I'm really trying to get people to think about becoming a trustee, because I also think it's, you know, great for your CV. It helps with skills if you're looking for jobs, that kind of thing. So, yeah. So Lilas, do you have oh, sorry, Fiona, you've got your hand up. So I'll come to you and then I'll go to Lilas. But
Well, no, it's just following on what you were just talking about, because I've been doing a bit of recruitment actually recently for boards, both for the Fringe and also for the Scottish SCVO, where I used to be a trustee. And it is difficult to find people. We've been advertising much more now. Obviously, you know, 5 years ago, a lot of it was done by word of mouth, as Julia's just talked about. But people aren't looking at adverts generally. So I was wondering whether there was any scope for actually creating a database of people who are interested in either extending their trustee roles or becoming a trustee for the first time, because we were looking for a chair for the Fringe and a lot of people are actually tied up for the next, I don't know, 6 months, a year or whatever. But if you knew, well, actually in a year's time, these individuals are coming free and they're interested. And there was that feed as well as you just advertising. But if there was a database that you could kind of go, oh, well, they look as though they might have the skill sets. They look as though they might be free in about 6 months' time. Could we approach them? then it could work maybe both ways, but nobody kind of keeps that register. And I just wondered if that might help.
No, that's a really interesting way of looking at it. So you've got a pipeline.
Yeah.
But that is presuming that organisations are well enough organised to think, right, we're going to need a change 6 months to a year. Not everybody is, but no, that's a great idea. I'm going to write that one down, actually. Thank you. Lilas, is your board quite a big board, or do you find it difficult to recruit for trustees at Cosgrove?
I think we, in a sense, have come the same route that Julia and possibly Fiona and that have as well, in that it was originally, having been, in existence for a fairly large number of years, it was very much, do you know someone, can we draw them on board? And I would have to say, over the years, by that methodology, Cosgrove have been very successful with the members of their boards over the years. But of course, these days, when you're, as I am, very closely involved in trying to obtain grant funding for the organisation, the funders want to see a spread of skills across your board.
Mm-hmm.
So you're very much we've gone through a process recently of reviewing effectively what you've just said, Tracy. We sat down, we looked at the skills base, what did the organisation require to take us forward, and we're now looking at recruiting to fill specific, what we see as perhaps specific gaps in knowledge and skill base within the organisation, so that we've got a nice rounded board.
Yes.
And it's not easy. It's definitely not easy.
Yeah.
To do that, to find people, and it takes a lot of time.
It does, and it's a big commitment for people to make if they're going to do the role properly. We call it lived experience. It's basically, about the issues that the charity is trying to help people with. And you mentioned your daughter. We've got a webinar on Wednesday about getting people with lived experience onto boards. How important do you think that is to have that voice there on the board, Lilas?
Oh, I think it is. I think it is important. It's all very well to have, myself as a retired CEO, to have an accountant, to have this or that on the board. But at the end of the day, you also do still require to have individuals like myself and a couple of the other board members that have lived experience and know what it's like and how frustrating it can be to actually get the service that your child or your young adult or your adult requires. And at Cosgrove, we pride ourselves on helping and assisting individuals from childhood right through, going through all stages. And that is very important to our organisation, that we can provide that level of service. And having individuals that have experienced, as I say, the frustrations, the pleasures as well, and can bring that knowledge of what might be suitable in terms of extra care, in terms of outreach classes, all that type of thing, I think adds very much to what I would like to see, certainly our board. And historically either, because I was involved with housing associations, I wouldn't have liked to have been on at that time the management side. I would not have wanted to be have a board that was all professionals.
Yeah, you need to have that voice, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah,
you need the ones that will tell you, by the way, do you realise that your repair service is maybe not as good as you think it is?
Yeah, definitely. There was a question in the chat, actually, and now I can't find it, but it was along the lines of, it was from Rhonda, saying, when you had to move to online board meetings, that certainly has its advantages. It means you can have trustees from across the country, but it has its challenges, I think, with board dynamics, that kind of thing. But obviously there was no choice in the pandemic. I just wondered if I could ask you, while you were on, Lilas, Do you find it works better on Zoom, or can you not wait to get back to in-person meetings? What's your thoughts?
Well, I think obviously through the bulk of the pandemic, we had to use Zoom meetings. I personally found them very valuable. I'm actually on a trustee in another organisation as well, and we moved as well to using Zoom, and I found it a very good means, but I don't think anything replaces the face-to-face. I think now, like a lot of organisations, we're probably going to look at maybe a mix.
Yes.
Because you don't get, you mentioned the world, you mentioned dynamics. I don't feel you get the dynamic at a Zoom meeting.
Yeah.
You can't see well, you can, but you can't get the feelings, and you can't draw out as well, I don't think, if you're not across the table from people. But I do think that there is room for a mix of both. We don't need to have permanently be traipsing across country to meet one another. I think it's got to be able, from our point of view, I would say a combination.
Yeah, it is hard to read the room, I think, online. But, when we're talking about recruitment, as I say, you might get trustees from elsewhere in the country. And if you are online, or maybe alternate meetings online, it means the travelling is cut down. So there is that advantage. Fiona, did you find Zoom meetings, were they working for you? I mean, obviously, I think you have to have a good chair to make them work, don't you?
They did work. I mean, we got through a lot of stuff, and they work functionally, like Lilas just said. But I think it helped if you already knew each other from pre-pandemic. For trustees who are actually joining during the Zoom era, I think it was a lot harder for them to understand people's motivations, to understand where they were coming from, what they were saying, what they weren't saying. Whereas if you've seen people face to face before, you can infer even in a Zoom environment. I actually left the board from a Zoom meeting, and it was really weird not being able to say to everybody cheerio and thanks for your help.
Yeah.
Really nice working with you. That was really odd, and equally there were people coming on who I'd never actually met, and there I was leaving, and they'd been there a year and I'd never met them. So I agree, you can cope, but I don't think it's the same, and I would much prefer face-to-face given the choice.
Yeah, so not a long-term solution, but it did the job. Yeah.
I think for an ad hoc meeting, or something like that, it would serve the purpose going forward as well, but I certainly think you need face-to-face as well.
Yeah. Robert, what about you? Obviously you're very local, community based. How did you do the meetings? Did you have to do everything on Zoom?
Yeah, we from March 2020 right through until July 21, everything was on Zoom. Our first face-to-face meeting was for AGM, which took place in September there. It was online and in face-to-face. Very, very difficult, I've got to say, to try to manage that. And I was delighted that we had a few staff members that knew exactly what they were doing there to assist us. But I'm not a favour, I've got to admit, of Zoom meetings. I believe that face-to-face helps you get the job done. My favourite saying, get the job done. But I think it's more beneficial to be able to see people's reactions much clearer as well.
Yeah, definitely. Julia, you said there was a bit of an issue with trustees. Some of your trustees couldn't operate during the pandemic, and you've now got a bigger board. Do you think you'll be using Zoom as you go, or are you desperate to get back to face-to-face meetings?
I think we'd all like to get back to face-to-face eventually, but it's the question of practicalities. So at the moment, we're just online. We've got our AGM coming up later this month, and we've deliberately chosen to do that on Zoom because it makes it more accessible for our volunteers and our supporters and anyone else who's interested to come along. So instead of asking them to come to, you know, a venue in central Edinburgh or whatever on a certain day, if they can just sit down at 1 minute to 7 on the evening or whatever and go on their phones or whatever it might be, that makes it much easier for people to actually attend the AGM. But that is a bit different from ordinary trustee board meetings where we're kind of getting stuck in and really discussing things. And I would agree with what the others have said already, and particularly for people who are new to the board who've never met any of the others in person, I think it's really quite challenging for them.
Yeah.
So I think going forward, I suspect with a lot of things these days, it'll be a combination of the two, but we'd certainly like to just get back around a table and have either a nice cuppa and cake or perhaps something stronger altogether in amongst the discussions.
Yeah, because I think you have to build a team on a board, don't you? And you can only do that with that kind of social interaction as much as the meetings itself. It's as much, you know, you would go to a meeting before and maybe 10 minutes before you'd have a catch up about people's families, what their day had been like. And I think that's what you don't get
yes,
online.
Exactly. And all those wee chats, you know, before and after, and as you're sharing lifts and this kind of thing, is also important to the dynamics of how people work in groups. So yes, it'd be good to get back to that eventually.
Yeah, and a good induction. We always say at SCVO on the information service, you know, induction's really important. It's like you wouldn't start somebody in a new job and not give them any information, not show them where the toilets are, where the coffee's kept, that kind of thing. And it's those basics, you know, this is how our board works. This is when you can expect to receive the papers, maybe pairing them up with a mentor or something like that. That's always good. So I think an induction's vital. I'm going to put you on the spot, Julia, just because I've got you right now. I was thinking, what 3 qualities do you think makes a good trustee? If you can narrow it down to 3.
3, right, okay. I think the first one that springs to mind is you need to be able to look at the bigger picture and not get bogged down in detail. So as trustees, we must always, you know, keep our beneficiaries front and centre. And look after the interests of the organisation as a whole. And it's so easy, especially for someone like myself who loves a good spreadsheet, to just kind of disappear into the detail and forget the bigger picture. So that's something I personally need to work on quite a lot, and just sort of lift up your eyes and look around and see, you know, what else you need to be considering. So a classic example would be if you know, if somebody's proposing a new project for your organisation, you need to think about all kinds of things like, does it take away the focus and any resources from your core activities? And if so, is that a wise thing to do? What are the risks associated with a new project? Is it going to be a flash in the pan and then kind of fizzle out? Or is it something that can be sustained if it's successful? All kinds of bigger picture things like that need to be thought of, and that's the trustee's job to do that. 2 more, let's see. You need to just be willing to get stuck in, really. I think some people have the impression that being a trustee is just being part of a talking shop where you meet every 2 months or whatever it is and have a chat about things and then go away and that's you for another 2 months. But in reality, it's not like that. Obviously, meetings are absolutely essential, but you need to get stuck in and do the work in between times, whether it's the kind of more headline grabbing stuff like PR and you know, forming new partnerships and all that kind of thing, or whether it's something really quite dull like making sure your insurance is in place. It all needs done, and trustees need to muck in and do that. So that's 2. Let me see, what else can we think of? I think I've kind of run out of ideas there, so maybe
That's
someone
fine.
else could chip
No,
in.
You've covered it great, and that actually I'm going to pick up on that balance between governance and operational stuff. And obviously last year trustees just had to get hands on, but Lilas, you have obviously staff, so what do you think about that? How do you get that balance between, you know, becoming too operational as a trustee? You've got to really be able to step back and see the bigger picture.
Yes, I think that's an important aspect, and it's an aspect that I think on occasions can falter in some organisations, in that the dividing line can get blurred. I think it's really important, as Julie said, that, I mean, our role is really to take the strategic look and, you know, not get into the nitty-gritty of things. You've got to rely on and trust your staff. It's also our role to ask for the reports that we need, but not reports that simply, you know, we look at and throw them in the bin because they're not really of any relevance. I think There is a tendency sometimes to ask our staff for too much data that we as board members, as trustees, do not actually need. And I think we've got to, at the end of the day, we've got to be independent of thought as well.
Yes.
I think it's really important, and I think that comes back to making sure that we're recruiting well, and that, you know, people come with their own ideas of what they think will be beneficial to the organisation. Not necessarily we're all going to agree with them, etc. But I think it really is important that the wee chats before meetings and the chats afterwards don't then lead into cliques.
Yes,
That
definitely.
can be quite, you know, can create a lot of failures in organisations. I think independent thought is very important. And as I said right at the beginning, I think also flexibility to take on board things, not necessarily operational. I mean, we've been having, as I said before, during the pandemic, etc., weekly meetings, which we would never have had under normal circumstances. It would just have been the normal board plus subcommittees. So there is the requirement to be flexible and to listen to ideas that come from your staff colleagues. But one thing I would pick up on was something that Robert said, and that was very much as an organisation, we went out into the community, and one of our staff was largely responsible for recruiting over 200 odd volunteers.
Wow.
Who delivered messages, took prescriptions out, etc., etc. And that's an aspect of the business that, and I think that's the other thing. There can be differences in trust, but I think at the end of the day, we are businesses, and we've got to have that thought process. You know, as Julia said, you know, okay, we don't want to get into spreadsheets too much, but we do have to remember that we are a business and that we have a lot of people dependent on us, both the people we're assisting and our staff and colleagues.
Definitely. Yeah, big responsibility. Thanks, Lilias. Fiona, we've only got a couple of minutes left. So 3 qualities you think makes a good trustee?
Just on that, I will be quick. I think it is difficult depending on what the actual role is. So I've been treasurer for 2 charities, and the role is completely different. One, I'm doing the accounts and I'm doing the journals, and I'm also a trustee trying to stand back. And the other one, there are loads of other people who do that, and I kind of have to take the stand back role and survey the horizon and be impartial and so forth. So I think it's important for people who are contemplating becoming a trustee to understand exactly what role they're being sought, you know, to do, what actually it involves. So, but for me, I would say something about working as a team. I know it's a cliche, but you are there for not your own agenda, but for the agenda of what is right for the charity. You can obviously put forward your opinions, but ultimately you will reach as a board a collective decision, and you have to be bound by that collective decision. So there's a teamwork thing in there for me. There's a courage thing in there as well, about having to be decisive and make some tough decisions, particularly over the last 18 months. And I would also reiterate the bit about scanning the outside world and not becoming too internally focused, but just seeing what are the opportunities outside in the big wide world and bringing those into the charity. Those would be 3 things on my list.
Thank you. We're running out of time. I think we could chat for another hour here. It's been really useful. I would just like to say thanks to all of you for sharing your experiences today, and I hope everybody listening has been inspired by the stories. Thanks to everyone who's attended and getting our Trustees Week celebrations off to such a great start. Today's session is part of a week-long SCVO programme of events to celebrate Trustees Week, and we've got another webinar this afternoon on trustee recruitment, which I mentioned before. Following that, tomorrow we're going to launch our new digital good governance checkup, and then on Wednesday we've got a webinar looking at lived experience on boards, and then on Thursday 2 webinars, one on what trustees themselves can do to increase diversity on boards, and a look at how digital tools can help make your board more inclusive. So all the details of that are on our website, and I hope you'll be able to join us. And remember, if you're an existing trustee, then do join our trustee network. And thank you very much for joining us, and enjoy the rest of Trustees Week, and goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you.